I spent 31 years believing I was nobody, just the unwanted stepson of a man who made sure I felt like a burden every single day. But as Leonard Hale lay dying in a hospice room, his final confession shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. The heart monitor pulsed in slow, mechanical beeps as Leonard's chest struggled to rise. Cancer had stripped him of the strength that once made him terrifying. His skin was pale and paper-thin, his body reduced to bones under hospital sheets. Yet his eyes, those same icy blue eyes that had watched me suffer for years, burned with a sudden, desperate intensity. "You're not who you think you are," he rasped, his bony fingers clamping around my wrist. The touch made my stomach turn. That was the same hand that had left welts on my back. The same hand that had locked me in a dark basement for days. The same hand that had paid for his son's private school while telling me I wasn't worth the cost of lunch. "What are you talking about?" I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "You took me in 1993, he gasped. "Your real name is—" The machines exploded into alarms. His eyes rolled back, his hand fell limp. And just like that, Leonard Hale was dead. The nurses rushed in, pushing me into the hallway while they worked on a man who was already gone. 20 minutes later, after the time of death was called, a nurse handed me a clear plastic bag. "These were your father's belongings," she said gently. Father. The word felt wrong. Inside the bag was Leonard's wallet, his watch, and a folded, yellowed newspaper clipping sealed in plastic. I unfolded it with shaking hands. "Billionaire's son disappears from City Park." Below the headline was a photo of a toddler. He had my eyes, my nose, and on his right temple, clear as day, the same crescent-shaped birthmark I'd seen in the mirror my entire life. My name, I believed, was Daniel Hale, but according to that article dated July 1993, I was actually Ethan Caldwell, the kidnapped son of tech magnate Robert Caldwell and his philanthropist wife Elaine. For 30 decades, I wasn't Daniel Hale, the warehouse supervisor barely scraping by in Dayton, Ohio. I was the missing child whose face once appeared on milk cartons. The boy whose disappearance triggered FBI searches, national headlines, and a reward that was never claimed. Leonard Hale hadn't raised me as a son. He'd raised me as a reminder of a crime he never thought would come to light. Growing up in Leonard's house meant knowing exactly where I stood. His biological son, Mark, was everything I wasn't. Star athlete, honor student, golden child. I was the extra mouth to feed. Every birthday made that clear. Mark opened expensive gifts, while Leonard reminded me I was lucky to have a roof. Every report card ended with Mark's rewards and my punishments. When Mark played on travel teams, I was told we couldn't afford my registration. "You're not blood," Leonard would say after a few drinks. The cruel irony was that he was right, but not in the way he meant. The woman I called my mother, Susan, loved me in the only way she knew. She worked herself into exhaustion, apologizing in whispers when she thought I was asleep. She died when I was 17, killed in a winter car accident after a double shift. After her funeral, Leonard stopped pretending. "You're out at 18, he told me flatly. "I kept you for her." 6 months later, I left with a trash bag of clothes and less than $100. I didn't know then that I was walking away from a stolen identity. Leonard's confession came because he was dying and afraid. He told me how he'd taken me from a park when my nanny was distracted, how he'd forged documents, paid off officials, invented a birth certificate, destroyed records. He told me my real parents never stopped searching. I found proof in the newspaper clipping, and later on a website my real parents had maintained for 30 years. Videos posted every birthday, age-progressed photos that looked painfully like me. When I finally reached out, my phone rang within minutes. "Please," the woman's voice trembled, "tell me about the birthmark." When I did, she broke down. The DNA test confirmed what my heart already knew. I wasn't Daniel Hale. I was Ethan Caldwell, the son who had been stolen, mourned, and prayed for every single day. The reunion made headlines. The FBI reopened the case. Leonard's legacy collapsed under the weight of the truth. His son threatened me, accused me of wanting money. I didn't, because what I gained was something Leonard could never steal again. Proof that I had always been wanted. Today, I'm learning what it means to belong, not to survive love, but to be surrounded by it. Not to earn my place, but to be welcomed home. Leonard Hale thought he'd gotten away with the perfect crime. Instead, his final words set me free. Because sometimes the family that raises you isn't the one you're meant for. And sometimes the truth waits decades, just long enough to bring you home. The days after the DNA confirmation felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold from behind glass. For 31 years, I had learned how to survive disappointment, but no one teaches you how to process suddenly being found. Robert and Elaine Caldwell didn't rush me. That surprised me. Billionaires, executives, people used to getting what they wanted instantly. But with me, they moved carefully, like they were afraid I might disappear again if they reached too fast. They rented me a quiet hotel suite overlooking Lake Erie. Not a mansion, not a spotlight, just space. Every morning, Elaine called to say good morning. Every night, Robert texted, "Sleep well, son." The word son felt heavy, precious, terrifying. On the third day, I finally agreed to meet them in person. Their house wasn't what I expected. No cold marble halls or echoing emptiness. It was warm, lived in. Family photos lined the walls, except every frame where a child should have been was filled with landscapes, pets, or charity events. Absences disguised as decoration. Elaine stood when I entered, her hands trembling. She didn't rush forward. She just stared at me, memorizing my face like she was afraid it might change. "You have his eyes," she whispered. Robert cleared his throat, fighting emotion. "And your mother's stubborn jaw." That was the moment it hit me. I wasn't a replacement. I wasn't an obligation. I was recognized. We sat at the dining table for hours. They told me everything. The day I vanished, the years of searching, the investigators, the false sightings, the psychics who took advantage of their grief. Elaine admitted she slept with my baby blanket under her pillow until it fell apart. Robert told me he'd kept my college fund untouched for decades. "Just in case," he said quietly. I didn't know how to tell them the truth, that I hadn't been safe, that I hadn't been happy, that the man who stole me had spent years reminding me I didn't belong anywhere. So instead, I said, "I remembered dinosaurs." Elaine laughed and cried at the same time. "You refused to sleep without your green triceratops," she said. "You named him Captain Stomp." Later that night, Elaine showed me the room. It had changed over the years, a nursery, then a child's room, then a teenager's room, but it had never disappeared. The walls were a soft gray now, decorated simply, waiting. "We couldn't let it go," she said. "If we did, it felt like admitting you were gone." That night, alone in the room meant for the life I never lived, I broke down for the first time since Leonard's death. Not because I lost something, but because I finally understood how much I'd been loved, even in absence. The media storm came fast. Stolen here, found after 31 years. Billionaire's son raised by abuser. Deathbed confession unravels decades-old kidnapping. I refused interviews. I wasn't ready to let the world define me again. Leonard's biological son, Mark, called repeatedly, angry, accusatory, afraid. "You're trying to erase my father," he shouted during one call. "No," I said calmly, "the truth is doing that on its own." I didn't contest the will. I didn't want Leonard's money. Keeping it felt like letting him touch my life one last time. The Caldwells offered me something else instead. Time. Time to grieve the childhood I never had. Time to rebuild an identity that wasn't forged through fear. Time to decide who Ethan Caldwell would be, without being shaped by cruelty. Therapy became different after that. My therapist said something that stuck with me. You didn't lose 31 years. You survived them. Some nights I still hear Leonard's voice in my head, telling me I'm nothing, that I don't deserve this life. But now there's another voice. Elaine's. Soft, steady, certain. You were always ours. Someone just hid you. And for the first time, I believe it. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt heavier than any noise. I stood at the defendant's table, not because I was on trial, but because for the first time in my life, I was asking the world to recognize who I truly was. The petition was simple in legal terms. Daniel Hale to be restored as Ethan James Caldwell. But emotionally, it felt like rewriting the first 31 years of my existence. Judge Eleanor Brooks adjusted her glasses and looked down at me, not with curiosity, not with judgment, but with something close to compassion. "Mr. Hale," she said, then paused. "Or rather, Mr. Caldwell. This court has reviewed the DNA evidence, sworn testimony, and federal documentation. There is no dispute as to your identity." Her gavel hovered. "With this ruling, the state formally recognizes you as Ethan James Caldwell, born July 2nd, 1993, to Robert and Elaine Caldwell." The gavel struck. And just like that, Daniel Hale officially ceased to exist. Elaine let out a sound I'd never heard before, half sob, half breath, like her lungs had finally remembered how to work again. Robert closed his eyes and pressed his forehead against his hands, shoulders shaking. I stood there frozen. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, whole. Instead, I felt quiet, like a storm had finally passed, leaving behind open land I didn't yet know how to walk on. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions. "How does it feel to be an heir? Will you prosecute Leonard Hale's estate? Do you forgive the man who raised you?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was complicated. Leonard Hale was a monster, and he was also the man who taught me how to tie my shoes. Both things could exist at once, and pretending otherwise wouldn't heal anything. Mark Hale cornered me 3 days later. He showed up unannounced at my hotel, suit wrinkled, eyes red with fury and panic. "You planned this," he accused. "You knew at the hospital. You let my father die without telling me." I met his gaze calmly. "No," I said. "Your father let both of us live a lie." His voice cracked. "Everything I have comes from him, and now it's poisoned." That was the first time I felt something from Mark I never had before. Pity. "I'm not taking anything from you," I said, "but you don't get to pretend ignorance makes you innocent." He left without another word. I never saw him again. The FBI officially closed the case 2 months later. With Leonard Hale deceased, prosecution was symbolic, but the ruling was clear. My kidnapping had been real, deliberate, and premeditated. The final report ended with one line that stayed with me. The victim survived. Survived. Not thrived, not protected, but survived. That mattered. Elaine struggled with guilt. She apologized constantly for not finding me sooner, for trusting the wrong nanny, for surviving while I didn't. One night I stopped her mid-sentence. "You didn't fail me," I said. "Someone stole me. That's not the same thing." She nodded, but I knew forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness, takes time. Robert approached healing differently. He taught me, not with lectures, but with presence. He taught me how to shake a hand without shrinking, how to speak without apologizing for existing, how to disagree without fear of punishment. One afternoon, while we were walking through his workshop, he said something that rewired my understanding of masculinity. Power doesn't come from being feared, it comes from being trusted. Leonard Hale ruled through terror. Robert Caldwell led through respect. The difference changed everything. I stayed away from the company at first. I didn't want to be the stolen heir. I wanted to be Ethan, just Ethan. But eventually, I joined as an operations consultant, not because I needed the money, but because I wanted to understand what my parents had built while they were missing me, and because for the first time, I was curious about the future instead of afraid of it. The hardest moment came unexpectedly. Elaine asked me if I wanted to visit Susan's grave, the woman who raised me, loved me imperfectly, and died believing a lie she was too afraid to confront. I stood there for a long time. I don't hate her, I finally said, but I don't forgive what she ignored either. Elaine squeezed my hand. You don't have to, she said. Love doesn't require erasing pain. That was the moment I realized something important. Healing doesn't mean choosing one family over another. It means telling the truth about both. I kept my old apartment for a while, my old truck, my old routines, because even though my name had changed, my resilience came from the life I survived, not the one that was stolen. Therapy helped, a lot. So did quiet dinners, board games, late-night conversations that didn't involve fear. The Caldwells never tried to make up for lost time with extravagance. They just showed up, every day. On my first real birthday as Ethan, Elaine baked a cake herself. It was uneven and slightly burnt. It's terrible, she said nervously. I laughed. It's perfect. That night, as we sat at the table, I realized something profound. Leonard Hale spent years telling me I was nothing, but the truth was far more devastating to him than it ever was to me. I wasn't worthless. I was stolen. And what's stolen can be returned. Not unchanged, not untouched, but still whole. Leonard thought his confession might save his soul or hurt me one last time. Instead, it gave me my name back, my parents back, my future back. I don't believe everything happens for a reason, but I do believe this: love that endures 30 years of silence is stronger than cruelty that lasts a lifetime. I was once an unwanted stepson, living quietly in survival mode. Now, I'm Ethan Caldwell, a son, a survivor, a man who finally knows where he belongs. And if you're hearing this story and wondering whether it's too late to reclaim who you are, it isn't. Truth has a way of finding daylight, even after 30 years in the dark.